All right, it is 5:30. I will call our work session for Monday, February 7th to order. Deputy Clerk, could you please do a roll call attendance?
Councilmember Henry.
Present.
Councilmember Mock.
Present.
Councilmember McKnight.
Present.
Mayor Johnson.
Present. Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning into tonight's work session. The City Council is meeting remotely pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the ongoing health pandemic. Work sessions are conducted to provide City Council with the introductory information, opportunities to provide staff guidance, and to facilitate initial conversations on a topic. No votes are taken. As such, there's not an opportunity provided for members of the community to provide comments or to ask questions during a work session. Those interested in providing comments to the City Council can do so during the regular meeting via Zoom. Information related to joining Zoom meetings is available on the agenda under quick link. Watch city meetings and view agendas and packets on the bottom of the homepage at cityofcarver.com. All right, with that, we've got two new employees to meet tonight. Mr. Schell, take it over.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'd like to introduce our two newest public services technicians. First, Carter Borg. Carter has been a seasonal with the City of Carver for the last 2 summers. Just has a great work ethic and knowledge of summer operations, and just an all-around great guy. And second, we have Austin. I told him I was probably going to butcher his last name. So Betow. He grew up on a farm in southeast or just southeast of Cologne with dairy cattle and crop farming. Has a great knowledge of equipment operation and maintenance, great work ethic, and just an easygoing guy. So with that said, Austin and Carter, this is the council.
Hey guys, did Chad tell you that in an effort to get to know you guys a little bit better on your first meetings, we like to play 2 truths and a lie?
Yes, you did.
All right, are you guys ready? Are you willing?
Sure.
All right, Austin, why don't you go first? You give us 2 truths and a lie, and then it's real easy because it's on Zoom. We'll hold up with however many fingers we think is your lie.
Okay. I've gone skydiving. I built an aluminum trailer and I started driving it at the age of 3. Yep, number 1.
Nobody thinks he went, oh, Lori's not sure that you, everybody thinks you didn't go skydiving. Which one's the lie, Austin?
I haven't gone skydiving.
All right. Is that something you want to do?
Eventually.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the City of Carver. It's good to have you on board.
Thank you.
All right, Carter, it's your turn. Are you game for 2 truths and a lie?
I've traveled to Alaska. I have the same middle name as my father, and I have a twin brother.
Ooh, that's a good one. Let's see, a lot of 3s. Nobody thinks you're a twin. Which one's the lie?
I am not a twin. I do not have a twin brother.
Right. Pretty intuitive counsel here. Well, thank you, Carter. Appreciate having you on board. And you guys, truly, we want to get to know you a little bit better. And this is kind of the best way that I can think of with the time allotted. So it's cool to hear a little bit more about you. And we welcome you to the City of Carver. We're going to continue on in the agenda. You are welcome to stay all evening, or you can cut out right now if you'd like. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you.
Moving on to the housing development update, the Carver County Community Development Agency. Ms. Smith, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you see my share?
Yep.
Okay. Tonight we have Allison Strike joining us from the CDA, so we both are going to give a little bit of a presentation and then we will take questions from the council. I want to stress that tonight we are not reviewing any applications. So the CDA does not have an active application in with the city. We are anticipating an application likely sometime in 2022. So we felt like it was a good time to get the council familiar with the project that some of you probably know better than maybe me, since you were here during the time of the approvals and development of Carver Crossing. But just wanted to give everyone the same level of base knowledge about the project so we can start from the same footing when the CDA does come in for an application for their project. So let's get,
Hey, Lori, can I ask that you put your camera on, please? Lori?
Yep, you just caught me with a bite of food in my mouth, so I will in a sec.
Thank you.
so right now on the screen, I have contact information. So tonight, if someone is watching and has a question later, I encourage you to either reach out to me. I'm Erin, I work for the city of Carver. My email and telephone number is there available. Allison's number and email also, she works for the CDA. She'll give a little bit of an overview of who the CDA is, the work that they do. And then these are my planning commission slides. So Dan was with us to talk some utility work, but I think I can paraphrase some of the information that he shared at that meeting if necessary. So the property that we're talking about tonight is directly west of Jonathan Carver Parkway, south of Carver Crossing. So the lot is addressed right now as 1591. You see it right now as an empty lot with a fire lane for Carver Crossing. So the project that we'll keep referring to is going to be on this site here. So it's directly north of the new Oak Tree development, east of Copper Hills. So right along Jonathan Carver Parkway, a pretty prominent site, something that we've been working on for a while for development of a second building. So let's talk through timeline. This project has been on a bit of a journey over several years. There's been some different applications that have been made, so I just want to talk through, just in case someone has a question of, haven't we looked at that before? Didn't we see this once before? So just to get everyone on the same page, we start in 2010, which is wild that that was 12 years ago already. So in 2010, the CDA, or the Carver County Community Development Agency, purchased 36 acres of property at the corner of Jonathan Carver Parkway and Ironwood Drive. And at that time, they did a proposal for several different uses. So CDA offices, Carver City Hall, and then 60 units of multifamily. The project did not move forward. Next, in 2012, the CDA submitted a concept plan for multifamily housing, which was Carver Crossing, single family, which becomes the neighborhood that we know as Copper Hills today, and the park and ride facility, which we know as Carver Station. So in 2012, the CDA completed a master planning process that laid out these different uses together. So it wasn't just one project being proposed. They all worked in conjunction together. So it was Carver Crossing, Copper Hills, and Carver Station. So I'll talk through those kind of as a package tonight as we go through the approvals, but they each needed each other to hit different approvals with both the city and the Met Council for some of our density requirements that we have. So 2013, the CDA applies for a planned residential development, or a PRD, which are really common in Carver. We typically see them with residential development. You might be asking, why did they get a PRD? Why was it necessary? So a PRD allows for different housing types on a site. So if you think about the two housing types that were proposed, Copper Hills and Carver Crossing, two different housing types. So a PRD was applied for to move forward for the two different housing types that were approved and eventually constructed. Carver Station property was sold to the city, which we moved forward with a grant application to allow for funding for that site. The PRD is approved. Copper Hills has been on a similar journey where it started with Mattamy, ended up being completed by MI Homes. So several different builders on that site. And then in 2013, two building pads were platted. So first is Carver Crossing, the building that we know today. And second is on that empty lot at 1591 Hartwell Drive. In 2014, the CDA sold 2.1 acres for Carver Crossing, and one building pad is obviously then left available. 2014, that property was constructed by Ron Clark Construction. Currently, the management is Stephen Scott. So the CDA owned that property, sold it. They do not own or operate the Carver Crossing project that is in town today. So let's talk a little bit about that PRD, break it down, get some information about why we needed to have it and where it stands today. So the PRD and the density requirement that we have in both our zoning section of our city code, as well as our comprehensive plan, calls for 4 to 8 units per acre. So don't think about just that 2.1 acres that is Carver Crossing, or else the density will make your brain explode because it's way too high. But if you think about it over Copper Hills and Carver Crossing and the building pad, it levels out, since Copper Hills has slightly larger lots than what we typically see for residential development. So in that range, 102 to 203 units were approved for Copper Hills and Carver Crossing. Phase 1 of Copper Hills was 47 lots. And then the Carver Crossing was 68 lots. So you take that number, you add an additional 2 acres that are held in outlot right now, and the range increases based on that 4 to 8 units per acre to 109 to 218 that are allowable. You take that 218, you subtract Copper Hills, the 47, you subtract Carver Crossing, the 68, and you're left with 103. So the approving resolutions of 2015 for the preliminary plat of the PRD was really explicit in the number of units that were going to be allowable for that second building. So there's a snap in the bottom corner of the screen right now from that resolution that calls out distinctly that that second building can have anywhere from 0 to 103 housing units on the subject property, which is the outlot. So a visual of the area that I'm talking about now. So in the yellow box is Copper Hills Phase 1, which is that R2 PRD. So that PRD allowed for Carver Crossing to be contemplated as well as the second building. The green P is Olson Park. So P is for park. And then the P/I is public, institutional, or Carver Station. So many Carvers in this equation. So you'll see that that's the area that's contemplated in that first resolution. That's the area that got us to that 218 that were allowable for residential units. So looking at the plat that was approved for Phase 1, as well as the 2 buildings. So obviously Copper Hills Phase 1 is here. This is Carver Station. And then this was the 2 buildings, the 2 areas that were platted for Carver Crossing. And then the second building that we'll be talking a little bit more in detail tonight. So you'll see here, this is the building site that is empty right now. This is the fire lane, also the beginning of parking for the second building. So there was enough foresight when the first building went in to say, we could repurpose that fire lane in the future for parking. So let's build it in a way that works today, but also in the future. So the area here is a fire lane, could eventually turn into parking for a second building. So back to the timeline, 2016, Carver Crossing was constructed. Second building pad continues to be held in outlot. In 2019, I think many of you will remember the CDA submitted a concept plan for the city. So applications went in for a second round of funding. We actually held an open house at Carver Crossing in 2019. So we invited, I think over 500 households got a mailed letter. So essentially anyone west of Jonathan Carver Parkway in that area got a mailed letter. And we held an open house at Carver Crossing, which was pretty well received. We got some feedback from residents at Carver Crossing with things that they wanted to see. One of them was a pool on the second building that they could use. So that was one of the asks, but we also heard from some of the new Oak Tree residents. A lot of them were new to the community, wanting to learn more about the project. So we held that open house in 2019. Unfortunately, there was a funding gap that could not be filled at that time, so the project did not move forward. So getting closer to where we are today. So in 2021, the CDA received $2 million from the county via ARPA funds. Allison will talk a little bit more about that and how it's going to be split in the project. And again, 2022, we don't have an application in right now, but we do anticipate through our work with the CDA that they're working towards an application that could lead to construction of a second building. Allison, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Mayor and council members, thanks so much for having me tonight. So as Aaron said, I'm Allison Strike. I'm the Deputy Director at the CDA. And for those of you familiar with us, we provide affordable housing in foster community and economic development. So when, as Aaron mentioned, we submitted this Carver Place and Carver Oaks, as we will refer to them, even though it's one building. We submitted this for funding to Minnesota Housing in 2020, and we did not get funded. At that time, we did get funded, if you're familiar with Trails Edge South, that's our building in Waconia that's under construction. So we are anticipating submitting this well, it'll be 2 projects, 1 building, submitting this to Minnesota Housing this year for funding. So one part of the building would be 60 units of general occupancy. And when we submitted the application to Minnesota Housing in 2020, it had 4 units for high priority homeless households, 4 units for people with disabilities, and then we were awarded 8 project-based vouchers through Metro HRA. And so that means that those households would pay 30% of their income towards the rent and the rest would be subsidized. So that makeup could change a little bit in this funding round. And so when we submitted in 2020, the total development cost at that time was just over 16 million. As Aaron mentioned, we got $1 million in ARPA money towards the general occupancy side. So funding options for this project could be county GO bonds or 9% low income housing tax credits. Next slide. And this is just a rendering, a potential rendering of the building. This was submitted to Minnesota Housing in 2020. Next slide. And then the second half of the building, which we're referring to as Carver Oaks Senior Residence, would be 43 units of affordable housing for 55 and better. And then our previous funding application included 13 units of public housing. So that would, those 13 units would really help to target those extremely low income households and help subsidize their rent. And when we submitted this in 2020, the total development cost at the time for that side of the building was just over 12 million. And then funding options for this project could include county GO bonds, 4% low income housing tax credits, or housing infrastructure bonds. And we did get $1 million from the county towards the senior side as well. And that's just an overview of what the project would look like. So Carver Place, which is the general occupancy side, is farther to the east, southeast, and then the senior side on the northwest. And I think that might be my last slide, just a closer view of sort of what the breakup would look like. So the building, the senior and the general occupancy would be joined by shared common space. Next slide. I think that might be my last one.
So again, no application to consider tonight, nothing that we have scheduled, but just wanted to get the council on the same page about how we got to where we are and an application that we're anticipating. So we can start fielding some questions, follow up with you if we need to take some time to think through anything, but we'll open it up for questions and discussion.
Thank you. Council, any questions for Aaron or Allison?
I have one.
Go ahead, Christy.
Okay, I see there's a lot more parking stalls. Are you planning on having underground parking for this new unit as well?
Yes, yep, there would be there'd be 103 stalls underground. Okay. So 1 for 1.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see, I'm gonna just go through the list since I can't see it all. Lori, any questions from you? Nope. Joy?
Just to refresh my memory, Aaron, I assume that if the CD is going to propose something similar to what they submitted for funding last time, it would still meet our density requirements for this property?
It would, yes.
Okay. And I assume we would review that when they are ready to make an application as well.
Correct. The helpful piece when I was trying to put all these pieces together was how explicit the resolution was in 2015. So there's a lot of history in those resolutions that we've been looking at, but I had a call last week with the Met Council just to talk through it to say, hey, we're starting to work on some of these projects. Does anything change for you? Do we need to think about anything? But so far so good. Everything has been checking out that this project works for the density requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I really appreciate all the history that you put in the front end of this, because while I was probably on the planning commission during a lot of it, I don't know that I remember all of those pieces. So thank you.
Yeah, a lot has happened. And I think it feels like it's been several different projects, but it took me a while to figure out that it was all one together, which made the numbers make more sense when I could put together that it wasn't just Carver Crossing, because that density was wild when I was taking it divided by 2 acres for a while.
All right, that's all I have, Courtney.
Thanks, Joy. Glenn, anything from you? Guess what, Glenn? You're on mute.
Allison, when I look at the building, I see just from the rendering that is there any type of separation between the senior and the regular occupancy? Is that they have separate entrances?
Yes, so the what's predominantly will separate the two sides is the community space. And so like there would be like a door, like a locked door to get into each side of the building. But the common space basically kind of goes right down the middle of the two buildings. Kind of right where the L is.
Got it. So is that on all 3 levels?
Yes.
Or- Okay,
Yep.
all right. That was my only question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have a few questions and comments. I love the senior and kind of, you know, regular apartment building combination. We've seen some really cool partnerships between our existing senior housing and daycares, Children of Tomorrow, and then Carver Ridge. And it's cool to see this really close and kind of really making neighbors turn into friends real quickly. And I love that idea. Let's see. Thank you guys for putting up the sign. I think one of my takeaways when we had a community meeting in 2019 were the neighbors who didn't have any idea that this building was going in. So being able to have that sign for the folks who are kicking the tires on the neighborhood or the area to understand that there is something going there and that that lot will not be a vacant lot into perpetuity is great. And I appreciate that. Just in the same information sharing piece, Erin, I'm just wondering if we can put this presentation on the CDA lot section of the cityofcarver.com of our website. And can we add in somewhere in there so that folks know what they're looking at, the street address that this building will have? I'm just trying to think of like a new resident coming to town. They might not even know, you know, what the CDA is, what that means, what they are all about. Let's see. I think that's it. Thanks for coming in, Allison. I appreciate the timeline.
Courtney, I have one more question.
Oh, sure.
I have one more.
Go ahead, Christine.
Excuse me, could you go to the last slide again? So in the middle of that parking lot, when you expand to add the new section, there is a community garden that is in there right now. Allison, have you thought about what might happen to that, relocated on the property or what? Because
we've been talking about figuring out a way to keep it, which means it probably will have to be relocated. But Julie, who's the executive director, her and I were just talking about that a couple days ago. Just especially with not only because it's, you know, great for the residents there, but even with some of the scoring metrics with Minnesota housing, to have something like that on site. So I don't know that we'll be able to keep them where they are, but we will definitely keep that in mind as we, you know, move forward to submit the round of funding this year.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that's on the radar because I would hate to see that go away. That's all I have, Courtney. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. Now I think we're done, Allison. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the update.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good night. All right, moving on to our large event permitting discussion. Mr. Anderson.
Mayor,
Thank you,
Council,
Mayor, and
before Dave jumps in, I just wanted to kind of tee this up just a bit for the council. If you remember, this was a strategic planning initiative specifically related to as we grow as a community, we're going to likely have more events, and usually the folks that are putting on these events are really community oriented. And so a lot of this is about making sure that we're prepared to not be the perennial stick in the mud that governments like to do or often are accused of. But there is quite a bit of coordination that can and should take place related to this, related to fire and public services and public safety, et cetera. And so just want to kind of bring that kind of forward to the council before Dave starts us off, but just again to give you an origin of where this conversation had started. So with that, Dave, can you take it away, please?
Sure. Thanks, Brent. Thank you, Mayor and Council. as Brent said, this was identified in the city's strategic plan. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Carver is growing very quickly, and a number of communities, big and small, actually throughout the state, do regulate large special events. And so I'm really here just to introduce the subject matter, provide a little bit of an overview about what a large event ordinance might look like, and then staff can try to get a feel for whether the council is interested in having staff think about, prepare a draft ordinance to be considered at a future meeting. And the memorandum in the work session packet tonight does talk a little bit about why regulating large events might be a good idea from a policy standpoint, which is of course what you as council members get to do is set policy and adopt ordinances. And the two primary goals, I'll try not to regurgitate too much from the memo, but I'll go over a couple of main points to foster the discussion tonight. But the two primary goals of a large event ordinance really are, first, to protect the city and its public resources, and second, to ensure that these events have a minimal negative impact on the public, because some of these events, when they're large, can affect people that might not be participating in them, and can also there's reason to protect people that are participating in the events. And just to touch on a few examples, large events, they often require public resources like police and fire services, public works resources, things like that, so that they operate in a safe and effective manner. And they also might present, some public safety concerns regarding traffic or parking, noise pollution, things that might affect people that are close by or surrounding the events. And so, there are a few department heads I know present tonight that may have thoughts or may even have some experiences in Carver with handling large events. That could be certainly helpful to this discussion. And I won't put anybody on the spot, but if anybody wants to chime in, feel free to do so. But really the point of the discussion tonight is to have the council talk about whether it wants to look into such an ordinance. I did include a list of common components that many of these ordinances have, and that starts on page 2 of the memo that's in the work session packet. And then I'm here to answer any questions. And I tried to mention this in my memo. There's really no perfect answer. There's no right or wrong. You can tweak these ordinances. You can add things. You can take things out. And really, I think it's important that we craft something that makes sense for Carver staff and that makes sense for this council. And so, with that said, I certainly open it up to your discussion, Mayor, and I'm here to answer questions.
All right, thank you. I generally don't go first, but I'll go first. I like the idea of doing special event permitting, and maybe not for the reasons that you would think, but I think I shared this in our strategic planning session. Brent and I have been on the other side of the table when folks have come at us, not come at us, but have approached us wanting to do events in the city of Carver. And we have, an idea of what we want to know, but being able to have kind of more of a plan and be able to work with folks saying, we need you to get this for us. This is what you need. These are our requirements. This is the notice requirements for the neighbors, just kind of reading in some of the sample ordinances. I like having it kind of down on paper and having those requirements. I think it could potentially draw more larger events to the city of Carver and could be a really good thing, and make those conversations go a little bit better when we are sitting across the table from somebody who wants to have a Jeep show or a fishing contest or any one of the other ideas that have been floated past us. Anybody else?
Well,
Okay.
you don't have no one else is available. I figure here that I was going to chime in on this. So I, obviously read through all of this. I think I wasn't at the strategic planning session, unfortunately, with some medical reasons with my family, I was gone for that. So I think that having a permit application is a good idea. I like that we're bringing this forward. After reading through some of the, I guess the ordinances from Cottage Grove and Medina, they did feel a little heavy-handed to me. And I think that some of the, I have plenty of notes here. I'm not going to go through every single one that I thought might be a little bit different, because we can obviously tweak through, but there's a few things I wanted to just mention that is probably something we should think about. And, in transparency, I am a person who chairs 2 fairly large events in town. So I have firsthand experience with doing some of this. When I was looking at some of these, we were talking about the liquor licenses and security and things like that. Things like the Steamboat Days, obviously we have plenty of security, for that, because that's definitely needed. That's a very large event. I want to look at some of our smaller events, medium. So we have the Soggy Bottom, which we just had. I know Courtney and Glenn, you guys both stopped by there. It's a shorter event. It goes for 3 hours. I think to have to supply security on something like that would probably be unnecessary. So maybe we look at its time allotments or something like that as to when security might be needed. This is obviously outdoors. It's not inside. I don't have the answer right now. I just want to kind of put this seed in everybody's head here to think about this. After putting that event on for, or being part of it for 13 years, security seems a little strange to me to be at something like that for a medical fundraiser. I was looking at a few other things when it talks about limitations on attendance. Some of those numbers are hard, if you have an open event, and I'll just use the Soggy Bottom again as an event that will fall in a good place with this. You can hope, plan on maybe 200, maybe 300 show up, maybe 100. But if you say it's 200 people and then 300 people show up, do we say, I'm sorry, we're full, you can't be here? So I think we want to maybe be cognizant of when we're talking about attendance numbers, especially for outdoor events. There was a really strange one in the Medina that said approval of floats. I'm assuming we don't want to spend time having our city staff approving floats on Steamboat Days Sunday. I don't think that's the best use of our resources, but so these are mostly things I think we should either think about or maybe should be removed. There's some stipulations for when you have food vendors. So with MDH, some of these said that, one of them said Washington County needs to approve. My understanding is that food vendors are approved by the Department of Health through the state of Minnesota. I don't know if there's a county one as well, but I think that things that I guess the outside group would be more concerning to me with the Department of Health rather than having county or things that are required for these. The permit review, there was one of them, I think it was in Medina, and it said that they were going to have to hold a hearing. I don't know if we need to hold hearings for all of our events. So again, I think that should be flushed out if we think it has to be in some sort of a hearing. Let's see, when we're looking at the time for filing, I did see in the Cottage Grove one, it said 60 days. I think that's a little long because we haven't described what the event actually is. 30 days to me, if you can get all your approvals done. I think 60 days, sometimes fundraisers, sometimes things come up and you want to put them on in less than 60 days. I think that's a little bit too long of a period to wait if you don't have to. And I also want to look at permit fees. Both of these mentioned different permit fees. A lot of these events that go on as fundraisers or as, again, with Steamboat Days, which is our town festival. For fundraisers, depending if they're outside, do we pay money to the city for events that we're trying to give money, we're trying to do good with and give it away? I think maybe we should think about what that looks like. And another one too, when it comes to, when we were talking about the liquor license, I'm going to back up just a second. And then if the Carver Lions have their Sunday brunch and they serve, alcohol, beer, or whatever it might be, a Bloody Mary, do they need security at something like that? Again, looking at kind of time periods in the event. I know that we need to be consistent across the board, which is why I want us to take some of these things into consideration before we look at adopting an ordinance. So that we're not backtracking and realizing, oh, wait, because events all look very different, right? But we can sort of categorize them into fundraisers or personal events, or like the Jeep show, which isn't necessarily affiliated with a city organization at all, but super fun when it was here. Let's see if there was anything else. Next tenants, security, permit review, hold hearing. I think those were my initial ones, and I'd be happy if, obviously council is going to have other comments, but being that I do run some events, if you have any questions for me on things that I've experienced with it, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. Very last, there's in both ordinances, it said something about off-site signage. Can somebody please help me with what off-site signage is supposed to mean? I don't know, Dave.
Yeah, I can chime in. My guess is, and I don't know the specific provisions you're talking about, but I think the goal there is to make sure that signage is figured out for people that might be looking for the event. So, you know, folks can find where they need to go park, where they should park. I don't have them up in front of me, which provision you're talking specifically about, but I can take a look here while the conversation unfolds, and perfect. I can let you know.
They just both said it. So I was like, the sign package must be something if it's in both of them. One more thing that was on my notes here. When we were talking about noticing people within 500 feet, so addresses, one of them said the person who is hosting the event or filling out the application is to provide names and addresses of people living within 500 feet. So when I think of, I'm just going to use Steamboat Days as an example, there's apartment buildings down here, there's, you know, homes that are in close proximity. I'm not sure that the person who's filling that out is going to be able to know the names and addresses of every single person within that 500 feet or whatever it might be. I know this year we did notice, I did ask Brent and Vicky, we did notice the neighborhood down here to say, here's the street closure times, but I think that might be a little bit, you know, I know how to do it, but I also know how some of this stuff works. You know, somebody who's coming in to do an event may not realize to find the names and addresses of every person within 500 feet. So it might be something that the city needs to help out with rather than turn that back on to the person who is renting or facilitating the event. So again, I am more than happy, especially as someone who does events, to fill out a permit application. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it actually helps everyone know what's going on. This has kind of been done informally, at least with myself in the last year or two with Steamboat Days. But it wasn't really a formal process of what I was providing. But I would like to not be so heavy-handed that it looks like we're daunting people and we are trying to like prohibit people and deter them from having fun special events in our town. So as long as we can keep that in mind, I'm really happy to look at all this moving forward. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Lori, I see you're off mute.
Yeah, I like that we're putting something together. It's something I would definitely support, but agree to with some of the Christy, Councilmember Christy Mock's comments on not being too heavy-handed. The one that I really felt strong about was page 15 out of 22 about the special services fees. I would prefer that the city doesn't collect a fee. I would hope some of these events could be, you know, just to really increase community engagement, you know, maybe have community members and those in surrounding communities come and visit our local businesses. So even though it's a tough balance because some of these things could be a lot of administrative work for staff, I would rather not see any fees assessed. So that was my feedback.
All right, thanks, Lori. Joy?
So Dave, maybe you can help me understand this. We have a facilities rental policy, right? That includes applications, includes guidelines around serving alcohol, security, et cetera, et cetera. Can you tell me how a potential ordinance or policy like this one for large events would overlap or be separate from our facility rental policy?
Yeah, and I haven't been around long enough to know what sorts of events are held on city facilities where you may see some crossover, and maybe Brent could fill in some of those gaps for me. But I think it's important to think of this more as something that's going to apply to any event that is conducted in the city that exceeds a certain amount of people. There are going to be plenty of events that are not necessarily at your city hall in that nice building where you
Right.
have events, or at city parks where you can rent maybe a portion of the park, or an area in the park for an event. So and we could look at how we would want the two policies, or the ordinance and the policy, to sort of work together. I wouldn't want to double make people go through a number of requirements twice and that kind of a thing. And that we could certainly work through. And just to go back a little bit and I think Christy and Lori make some good points. And the reason we're having the discussion is to talk about if there are things you don't like in these ordinances. These were just samples. And so I think that's good that you're raising some of those points. The special service fee, really that's intended, I think, to offset some of the public resources that go into large events. I understand many of these events are held for really important reasons, right? They're fundraisers, and they're nonprofits that are raising money, and for really important things for the folks that hold the events and for the community. But at the same time, sometimes they're not budgeted for by the city. And so we want to be careful not to open the door for events in a way that might cause the city to be spending its own public dollars on events that might go toward, although a really important cause, a cause that the city couldn't spend money on if it wanted to make a donation, for example, because cities can't make donations to nonprofits and that kind of a thing. So, so that's just my, kind of quick little spiel about special service fees. And I do think they serve a good purpose, especially when you're going to have to pay police officers overtime, maybe for a really, really big event, or you're going to have to bring in, equipment from the public works folks and that kind of a thing. So hopefully that answers your question, Brent. I don't know if you'll have anything to add about how this would interplay with the various policies we have about renting city facilities, but it is intended to cover more than just city facilities. So
I would say in general, this is more for outdoor events, just because of the availability of venues in the city. So think of parks, public streets. And after I finish, I invite and encourage, Chad, Aaron, Callie, and Vicky are on the call. I think at some point in a lot of these events, they're asked to provide feedback, plan, coordinate, etc. So I think their comments and experiences will be helpful to the council. And to echo what David said, and kind of where some of you have already started, is give us the ingredients to this ordinance. Tell us what you like and don't like, and then we can together build something. An example of where I think a well-intentioned project was kind of complicated on the backside of things, and this was maybe 6, 7, maybe even 8 years ago, is the Lions were considering organizing a circus in the community, and we were trying to find a spot, and was it going to be in a park, and what would it do to the park? And they were looking at the lot south of the fire station, and we were considering, could they park on Jonathan Carver Parkway and walk into the circus, and who is going to pay for law enforcement? And I think well-intentioned an idea, but there are a lot of things at play. And so having those details, being able to coordinate between the department heads you see on the screen, and then kind of an extra, like, and not all events are going to have this, but inevitably you might, we had a small but intentional group that was concerned about the city using public tax dollars for an event that they thought could be defined as cruelty toward animals that were involved in the event. And so having having an ordinance in place that helps kind of set some guidelines on when public resources are used and how, gives us the tools and the team that you see on the screen, the tools to make those decisions without trying to kind of design, build it on the fly. And so with that, I don't know, Callie, you maybe want to kick us off with any experiences or perspectives that you think would be helpful to the council to hear?
Yeah, I actually just got out of a class all weekend about large events and how to make them as safe as possible. And this was a big topic about, just creating some sort of template for people to apply so we can, make recommendations, not really be the stick in the mud, but to kind of allow some guidance on, whether it's code or whether it's just to make the event a little safer for anybody that attends the event would be something that I believe the council this would be the right direction to go. When a large event such as Steamboat Days, does it make sense for us to have medical coverage down there during the event? We've had several medical calls down there during the event. So, whether or not we need to, have a crew down there to have a quicker response during a citywide event like that, I think would be great. And likewise for other smaller events, sometimes require the fire department to be there. And it just would be good to have some guidance on, what requires us to be there and not.
Chad, Aaron, or Vicky, any thoughts?
No thoughts here. Thank you.
I don't have anything right now.
I would just add that I agree with some of the things that Callie mentioned in regard to a concise way to be able to gather the information or the request. I think sometimes what happens now, I know from an administration standpoint at City Hall, I know we're gathering a lot of pieces of information to be able to support the event itself. Things to do like the liquor license or their copies, signs and things like that. And it would be one place to be able to gather all of the data, which is different from what like Chad's group does, where they do a lot more of the physical support of moving barriers and cords and trailers and things like that. So, but I think just to have one concise place to gather all of that data up front and then be able to process that and react and document it rather than a verbal call here or, an email here and it's sort of all over the place. So that would be my addition.
All right. Thank you, guys. Glenn, your thoughts?
I don't mind a special services fee. If people at City Hall are putting their time, effort, and energy to verify to go over the permits, I mean, just as long as it's nominal and doesn't put a price tag on it that's going to scare people out from even having an event. But just for more like an event review and stuff like that, I don't have a problem with a $50 or $100 application fee. Other than that, I defer to Christy because she has a lot of experience with putting together special and large events. And with all of that experience, I'll just keep it out open here with what Christy has in mind for some of the things that she can foresee that others of us can't. So that's all I've got.
Thanks, Glenn. And I think, I think the theme of our feedback is that some of the items in the examples did seem a little heavy-handed. And that's, again, like my intention with this was not to get in the way, but maybe make things just a little bit more organized. I don't have any issues with the fees. I actually like the notification requirements because that way we can say you did get a mailer telling you that there was going to be a band downtown for Steamboat Days. This is an annual event. And we let you know, we gave you a heads up for this. And as far as the permitting fees, I kind of think, I don't know who pays for that for Steamboat Days, but that seems like that should be the responsibility of the organizing party and not the city. So I think that's it. Dave, did you get enough feedback from us and direction to work on a
I have a
draft?
couple more comments before we're done, Dave.
Okay.
Oh, should I go? I didn't.
Just a second, Christy.
Yep.
Dave, well, you know what, go ahead, Christy.
Okay, so when Glenn had talked about the permit fees, I think I want to be careful. Oh my gosh, excuse me. I want to be careful on permit fees rather than like special services fees. Because what I don't want is someone to come in doing a smaller event and be like, it's $100. And we can't foresee every event that's going to come through and what their, what their dollar amount might be. They may need very little from the city, besides maybe we have to put up a couple of barricades or something like that. That physical movement of things is one thing. I want to be careful when we call it permitting fees, depending on what it is. Again, this is not fleshed out yet, but let's keep that in mind. And then I think when it comes to Steamboat Days, we need to remember that this is also our town festival. So, we're all working together on this and providing this, huge event for the community. So when we're talking about permitting fees and things like that, I mean, the Steamboat Days Committee itself and our budget, we pay a lot of money out of pocket every year, like almost like a lot of money to be able to put this on. And I think that we do need to maintain some partnership between the city and that committee of volunteers as well, rather than trying to separate it out that it's not a city event. We do pay for, like the city does pay for the law enforcement. But again, the Steamboat Days Committee is outputting 5 times that amount of money or 6 times that amount of money. I'm glad to hear Callie saying that maybe we should have some medical presence down here. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I think that's actually a very good idea. Not to be the stick in the muds, Callie, and be, again, kind of overzealous with it. So those are just the couple things that I want to follow up with, is that Steamboat Days is really a community event that's being put on. I'm glad that we kind of all work together on it. So I think maybe we need to look at that as a bit of a separate entity to some of these other things that go on. And then just being a little bit careful on what we call permitting fees or special services fees or something like that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, Christy. I think that that's a larger policy decision that we have a little bit further on down the road in this. And if there's an umbrella placed over the Steamboat Days event specifically, and if and why, and if Dave can defend that, potentially, possibly. But I think that that's something for a discussion further in the process. With that, Dave, did we give you enough direction to work on a draft?
Yeah. I think so, yeah. And, this will probably be a coordinated effort between myself and Brent and the department heads too, that, and I don't know in terms of next steps, what that looks like. Well, Brent, I don't know if you've thought through this more than, to see where it would go tonight, but my thought would be it would probably come back for another work session discussion, because it sounds like while the council is on board with an ordinance, there are a number of provisions in these other ordinances that are, too much or probably a little over the top, which again, that's why we're having the discussion. And I think that's reasonable from a policy standpoint for council members to have that thought. So Brent, do you have thoughts on where we go with this next, other than putting a draft together?
Yeah, I feel like we've got I'd say a lot of good seeds to plant. So I would take the information that we all heard tonight and meet with, our leadership team, and I would be an advocate for focusing more on what we heard from the council and what we believe we need locally, and less inclined to think about what other cities have. Because my speculation is that a lot of cities' ordinances are reflective of the events that they have or have had in their communities. And so I think we've kind of heard some kind of how special Steamboat Days is. And I think we have an opportunity to be sensitive to that while also getting at kind of the heart of the matter of like consistency and planning, because just from experience, I know that there have been times where Vicky's gotten a call, a week before someone wants to bring, 200 people into the community, and she's calling Chad and she's calling Callie and Katie, and we're trying to figure out, who does what. And so, the comment on fees resonates. For me, this is more about information collection. So like the actual a fee to fill out a piece of paper, would be nominal or maybe nothing, because we want people to fill out the form. The policy piece is going to be where the council sits on what would happen if, let's say, one of the local churches wanted to do a concert out in a field in the city, and they wanted law enforcement coverage, and they wanted public services to do garbages. We'd want to have the council give us direction on that, so that we would have to have a special meeting with the council to answer those types of questions. And I think it's a both and. I think we can, just based on conversations with Dave, I think we can carve out some special provisions for, Steamboat Days as kind of a joint community festival that the Lions put on, but the city supports, while also doing the things that we talked about this evening and being fair and equitable and consistent throughout.
Just to piggyback off that a little bit, I could be wrong. I don't think an ordinance like this will affect Steamboat Days very much, because that to me seems like a very well-oiled machine. The city has a history with, preparing for that and having that event every year. This to me, this process is going to, I think, have a much more important impact on other people and other events that, either were proposed recently and didn't happen, or maybe like the circus thing, there just wasn't a good process in place for that sort of coordination to work or make sense. That's the feeling I get in seeing, all of the involvement that went into Steamboat Days, last summer and into the fall when it happened. So that's just my thought, but I think it's important to say that, especially for you, Christy, but also for the other council members, because I really don't anticipate this being any sort of a burden on Steamboat Days.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that. But Brent, I like your comments there. Thank you. I think that, being that feeling a little more focused on getting that information gathering, I think is really important. And I'm glad to hear you say that. So I think obviously the more information we have, the better things can run and everyone knows what's going on. So thank you for that, both of you, everybody.
All right. I think we're ready to move on from large events to temporary liquor licenses. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, thanks again, Mayor. So I was contacted a few weeks ago by staff just to clarify some of the statutory requirements on temporary on-sale liquor licenses. And just for a little context, only certain types of entities are eligible under state law to get like a full-blown on-sale liquor license that would last all year long. And those are restaurants, hotels, bowling alleys. There's a very small number of entities that can get those licenses. So the legislature has provided cities the ability to issue temporary on-sale licenses to nonprofits and clubs and other entities that might not be able to get the full-blown liquor license, so that they can hold events in the community and serve alcohol, albeit with some of the statutory restrictions and insurance requirements and that kind of a thing. But interestingly enough, the legislature has also imposed some limitations on this. And I think why it's an important conversation to have with the council now is because Carver recently surpassed the the 5,000 person population, which means that one of the limitations is triggered. One of the statutory limitations is triggered, and this is really meant for kind of an FYI for the council as you think about these licenses when they come to the city for potential issuance. But, really the limitations are, I think of them in two ways. One, which is always applied in Carver, is that you can't issue more than 12 days worth of temporary licenses to one organization in a single year. And I think the intent there, I could be wrong. I never want to get into the minds of lawmakers, but I think the intent there is because if you allow someone to operate, more than 12 days a year and sell liquor, what you're really doing is creating a type of permanent license that allows them to hold multiple events. So they decided to cut that off at 12 days. But now that the city is over the 5,000 resident threshold, it also is limited in the amount of licenses that can be issued to one organization or for one location within a 30-day period. You can only do it once. And I think that's really important to think about because I know that in talking with staff, there have been multiple entities, nonprofits in the community that have held fundraising events, for example, at Village Hall in the same month. And both of those events required a temporary on-sale liquor license. And so that's something, for example, that will not be possible anymore because the city is precluded by state law from issuing multiple temporary on-sale licenses for one location within a 30-day period. And again, I think the discussion tonight is really just to make you aware of this, make sure staff is aware of it. One thing that Vicki reminded me of probably after she looked at this memo was these licenses, although they're approved by the council, they also go to the state for their final approval after the council approves them. So this is something where there is a little bit, albeit probably minimal state oversight here. And they do have their fingerprint on these things and they see what the city issues. So it's worth reiterating that. And I appreciate Vicki reminding me about that. I sometimes forget about how these things are processed by staff. So really, that's the update. I think it's something that we should keep our eyes and ears on when temporary licenses come to the council, because my thought is there could be events that happen regularly during certain months of the year that the council might be in favor of, and you do have discretion to issue, one entity a license over another entity. You hold some of that inherently as the elected officials. So happy to answer any questions, but that's really the rundown of these limitations and how they might apply to the city, especially now that you've been growing. So.
Thanks, Dave. I think my thoughts on here, you noted in your memo some of the workarounds. I guess my question I might ask of staff would be, can we send a letter out to everybody who's had a temporary liquor license in the city of Carver within the last year, giving them a heads up about this and about this change and what it means, and kind of essentially taking Dave's memo and just breaking it down a little bit. And then I think one of the workarounds was working with somebody else who has a permanent liquor license in our city and kind of having them serve as their bartender, their server at their events. Could we also have that letter have the list of the folks who have a regular liquor license in the city of Carver and the contact information for that accompany this letter that goes out? Does that make sense?
It does. I'd like to hear from like the council on it, because one of the things I'm not sure everyone knows what the workaround is. Like, so one of the way that I understand it, we really only have two groups that utilize this. Vicki, correct me if I'm wrong. It's the Black Sox and the Lions. Is that correct?
Yes, because we are talking about the intoxicating ones, not the 3-2.
Right.
So there's a different process
So,
for the.
We have a couple of, so for the Lions, we have a couple of groups who we serve the alcohol for their events. So like the Carver Fire Department is about to have a fundraiser. We are going to be serving for them. one of our events.
Do you think a temporary liquor license?
They should be applying for something. I mean, I guess I'm not, this part of it isn't my event, but I know that we've been asked for the fire and rescue for their fundraiser that's coming up, that we would be there. I don't know whether that all is fleshed out and all the paperwork or anything's been filed, but I know that there was a request for that.
Yeah, I don't know. Dave, can you weigh in on that? I don't know if someone with a temporary liquor license can serve as the kind of the provider. Doesn't it have to be someone with a full-time license?
It probably depends on how the event's set up. I mean, under the statute, a nonprofit like the Lions can, I mean, they can obtain temporary licenses to serve at an event held at a.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think that would be a problem. I again, some of this is new to me, and I'm not sure how everything's structured, but that doesn't strike me as, you know, a problem just off the top of my head, Brent. I think that happens sometimes. But yeah, there are, and I'm glad you raised this, Mayor, because, you know, there are some workarounds. For example, you know, although 3.2 beer is very quickly disappearing from society, I think Minnesota, maybe one other state, still has laws on the books about 3.2. So, you know, frankly, the beer makers are finding it less and less meaningful for them to put resources into 3.2 beer, because not many states even create that as a thing. But that said, it still does exist. And so, you know, you can issue as many temporary licenses for the sale of 3.2 beer as you want. None of the limitations I talked about before apply. But then, you know, there's also that thing about either caterers or other on-sale licensees coming to an event. I think the reason that didn't jump out as a great option in the cases of the Lions and maybe the Black Sox is because I think part of their fundraising model is that they are able to sell you know, liquor at these events, and then they put that money toward their cause. And so to have an on-sale licensee come and do that, you'd obviously probably have to pay them. And I don't know if they'd be willing to donate their time or their alcohol or, you know, the proceeds to the cause. Maybe they would and see it as sort of a way to give back to the community. But
yeah, you hit it on the head there,
right,
David. It has to be an on-sale licensee for those. And just to circle back to the mayor's comments, I was thinking that it'd be better to meet, just because it's a smaller group, rather than send a letter and then have them translate. Just have Vicky and I and maybe Dave meet with a representative from the Lions and the Black Sox, and then just kind of like work this out. Because that, you know, at a minimum, I think we're talking about some type of informal arrangement that we might have to memorialize in the policy, so that getting it, because I think the Lions have a brunch in November and the Black Sox have bingo, both of which serve alcohol, and under these new rules, they both couldn't happen in November, which they, you know, by past practice always have. And so we'd have to try to work on is it at every, you know, you take October this year, we'll take November, and then swap the next year, or how that works. But, you know, and eventually as we grow, we're going to have more than likely a third group, you know, and so it'd be better if we could try to set it up with the current users and then incorporate language that would include everybody. It would be a little bit more seamless. So that's why you got the pause on the letter, because I think just meeting in person would be a better form for us to try to explain this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's even better. My idea was just, I don't want this to catch anybody by surprise. I don't want the Black Sox to put all kinds of thought and planning into the bingo event, and I don't want the Lions to put all kinds of thought and planning into the brunch event and think that they can have them on their traditional dates and, you know, come early November, late October, this comes as a surprise. So it sounds like that's a more than terrific solution. So thank you for that. But I don't want to be the only one to weigh in on this. So council, any other thoughts, comments?
I have a couple of fundamental questions about this, just to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, Dave. So when we're talking about let's say the Lions event. So if we have the Soggy Bottom golf tournament outdoors at Riverside Park, whether it's outside or in the city hall, we still can only get it once per month, no matter where the location.
Yes, if the licensee or the entity that's applying is the same, if it's the Carver Lions, then it's actually not even the same month, it's within 30 days. So let's say, for example, you have an event at the end of January at one location in town, and then you want to have another event across town in the middle of February. You can't do that because it's within 30 days, and the same entity can't get more than one temporary license in any 30-day period. The same limitation goes for one location. So I think if they had an event at one location at the end of January, and then a totally different entity wanted to have another event in the middle of February at that same spot, they couldn't do it either. So hopefully that makes sense. But
just a clarification piece, the temporary licenses are good from anywhere from 1 to 4 days, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not just you could have it one day, like you could have all of Steamboat
Correct.
days. You just couldn't have another Steamboat days like the next week.
Yep.
Thank God for that. I don't have enough energy for that. No, and that's under number 2 here with the statutory limitations. It talks about that officially designated community festivals are exempted from, or it doesn't count as the days, right? It's just one event. Does that also qualify under the 30 days? So we can't have anything 30 days before Steamboat days and 30 days within 30 days before, within 30 days after, or because it says designated community festival, does that become its own entity?
Yeah, I'm just pulling the language up. I'm almost 100% sure that the community festival is an exception to both of the limitations, but let me double check, because these statutory provisions are a pain to look at sometimes.
Well, right here, tell me if I'm reading this correctly, and then this is what that means. It's a festival is on its own. What we have is temporary. Okay, so more than 5,000 people may not issue more than one temporary license to any one organization for any one location within any 30-day period, unless the temporary licenses are issued in connection with an officially designated community festival. So does that pull Steamboat days then out, whole mix?
Well, yeah, it comes down to whether it's considered a community festival. And I think given the city's approach towards Steamboat days, is it probably does. There is no statutory definition of community festival, of course, which would be nice. But to me, knowing what I know about Steamboat days and knowing what I know about how other communities have interpreted the community festival provision, is that we wouldn't be talking about that 30-day limitation with respect to Steamboat days. I don't think I've heard of any other community festivals in Carver that would allow that exception to be triggered. I could be wrong, I guess, but I'm looking at the language now, and yes. So the example I would use on that one is, Christy, I think if who gets the liquor license for Steamboat days? Is it the Lions?
Yes.
So if the Lions came to get a temporary on sale license for Steamboat days, they would be able to get another license for a separate event within 30 days or 30 days prior, because that community festival isn't gonna qualify for that limitation.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And when we have, let's say we have weddings at the hall or something like that, somebody rents that has no bearing on any of this, right? If they have a wedding reception and they have alcohol, none of that has any bearing on any of this stuff.
A wedding at City Hall, you said?
Yeah, if they rent the community room at City Hall where we would have bingo or brunch or something like that, and a wedding comes in and they have alcohol at their reception, that does not affect any of this, does it?
It certainly would. I mean, they'd have to get a liquor license. You can't serve.
No,
liquor
I
at a
understand
wedding,
that. I'm
so.
saying that doesn't prohibit the Lions then from having an event with liquor in it. in the same 30-day period?
It would if it was at that location. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not doing that to you. That is just, that's, okay.
No, I mean, that's kind of why and I don't know, Vicky could maybe chime in on this. I mean, are there weddings that occur at City Hall that people come in and get a temporary on sale license to hold the wedding? I mean, I'm not sure they would even be eligible for it because they're not nonprofits, they're not clubs. I don't think there's ever weddings at City Hall that liquor is served at, and if there is, I'm not sure it should be.
Yeah, no, that is correct. They are not eligible to receive a license. They would actually have to hire, like you indicated, they would have to hire a caterer to serve that, or if they're just serving it and not charging for it, they can just serve it if there's no cost involved.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Your answer scared me initially. Thank you, Vicky and Dave, for coming back with the answer to that. Okay, that's all I have.
All right. Anybody else? Glenn, looks like you're off mute.
This pertains to intoxicating liquors and strong beer, not beer, correct?
Correct.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Does anybody know if, I'm not sure if the Black Sox sell 3-2 beer or strong beer. I don't know.
3-2 beer.
Okay, so this wouldn't even, that was my concern because they wouldn't be able to serve, well, their 12 days worth because they have a lot more than 12 home games. But
Right.
like if a softball tournament or something was taking place up in Community Park, and they wanted to have intoxicating liquor, and they would have to get their own permit, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And right now I can add that the Carver Black Sox get a different type of license for their baseball games.
Okay. What permit is that, Vicky?
It's almost like a seasonal. They have it for the entire season and it's issued by the state.
Okay.
Right now it's only 3-2.
Okay. And then, so then it would be different if they had an off, well, for lack of better words, off-campus event where they would actually have it in City Hall or something. Okay.
That is correct. I think Brenda worked on that license. I'm pretty sure, Brenda, wasn't the Carver Black Sox license, the last one that they did for their bingo event was an intoxicating liquor license, a temporary one.
It was?
I don't remember. I don't want to say one way or the other. I can dig through my files, but I don't want to commit.
I think that one had to be approved by the state. That's why I'm thinking that it was. So
I think you're right, but yeah, I would have to check.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all relative. That's all I had for comments. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other comments, questions? Joy's shaking her head, Laura's shaking her head. All right, I don't think we have anything else. Thank you, Dave.
So, Mayor?
Yep.
Just so for next steps, I think what we'll do is we'll meet with these groups, but eventually we'll end up coming back because I think this conversation proves out that we should try to memorialize this in some type of policy so it's clear to everybody what they can and can't do, just so we don't have any frustrated folks thinking that they can maybe have an event. And part of that process will try to be uncover a fair way to establish priority and procedure for getting a space and having access to that license.
Sounds good. Thank you. Let's see. Do you have anything for the city manager's report, Brent?
Yeah, I just have one thing, and it's so ironic because we were talking about this, I think maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago, and I said, it's really never happened, so we don't have to worry about it, but it's related to conduit bonds. So the city has received a request within the last few days for conduit bonds. And so kind of the Cliff Notes version of that is in this instance, a nonprofit is asking to use our bond status. The city receives or gets up to $10 million in bank qualified bonding. And so if the council supports it, what you can do is basically kind of loan that out, no pun intended, to this entity. It's at no risk to the city for as far as credit, but they get those tax exempt bonds. In this case, the user is Southwest Christian High School. They're looking to refinance some debt that they have. They're working with 2 cities. I don't know what the other city is. The city would be eligible for 1/2 of 1% in administrative services fees related to the bond request. So I've sent an engagement letter that our bond counsel prepared related to it to Dave and then to Paul Steinman. So we'll have some more clear and detailed information for you, likely at your meeting on the 22nd. But just wanted to give you a heads up. It's not something that we've done in quite some time, but it is something that we want to bring to your attention, get some of your consideration on. So am I missing anything related to the relevant details there, Dave?
Well, no, and I haven't had a chance to look at what you sent, Brent, but what I can tell the council is that these are great for cities if you don't use your bonding capacity, because it's essentially risk-free money that you get for these deals. All you have to do is and you know, I'm not a bond lawyer. I have a handful of colleagues who do that, and I know that the city uses TAP for their bond services, and Mary Apple will certainly have more information for the council when this comes to you. But as I understand it, these are really good deals, and it allows you to basically get some money to put back in the city's coffers that is risk-free, and it would be you know, a very good idea for you from a policy standpoint to take it. So a number of cities do this. It's not uncommon at all, and you'll hear more about it. So those are just my 2 cents at this point.
Great, thank you. That's it, Brent? Okay, thank you. With that, let's hold city council requests until our meeting so that you've got enough time to switch between the 2 meetings. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember McKnight.
I'll second.
And a second by Councilmember Sayer. Deputy Clerk Good, could you call the roll?
Councilmember Henry.
Aye.
Councilmember Mock.
Hi, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer.
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, motion passes. We'll see you all at 7.
Thanks.